Hey everybody, I'm Bucky Badger W, and today is my debut of my new two-part series on this channel, my 2021 NFL Power Rankings. Today I'm starting with the AFC. My own rankings were inspired by the Franchise Guys Power Rankings series on YouTube, and this series is my little spin on that one. My rankings work like this. At every position group, I ranked each team from 1 to 32 based on how well I think that position group will perform this year. I tried to factor in basically everything I could think of. Anywhere from quarterback to linebacker to interior defensive line, home field advantage, offensive and defensive coaching, and obviously much more. I then plugged all of these rankings into a formula, which should show up on your screen right now. Obviously, the more important positions are valued more, and the less important positions are valued less. By the end of that process, each team got a ranking assigned to them, and the teams with the higher rankings show up higher on my list. This was the most fair, unbiased, and accurate way I could think of doing power rankings, and they also help me go accurately into the strengths, weaknesses, and everything in between on each team. The graphics I made should present a good visual of each team's strengths and weaknesses, as well as their best players, their X factors for the year, and even my description of each team in 3 words or less. As you can guess, it took me a pretty long time to do the rankings, make my visuals, write the script, and record all of this, so I'd really appreciate it if all of you would consider sharing this video with another football fan to get the word out. Also, if there's something you disagree with in the video, please leave me a comment and tell me what you think. Finally, I've left timestamps to each team's preview in the description of the video, so if you're just interested in skipping forward to your team, by all means, be my guest. Lastly, I'll be subscribing to everyone who comments who they think is the most underrated and overrated team in the AFC, along with who they got as their champion. Without further ado, let's get started with the NFL's 32nd ranked team. Let's start with the 32nd ranked team in all of the NFL, the Houston Texans. The Houston Texans are in complete freefall. Since the 24-0 lead over the Chiefs in the AFC divisional round at Arrowhead, seemingly nothing has gone right. They've traded away franchise cornerstones in J.J. Watt, DeAndre Hopkins, Jadeveon Clowney, and more for pathetic returns, and the one saving grace of the putrid Texans franchise, Deshaun Watson, is facing horrific charges that, if he's proven guilty, may mean he won't play football again for a very long time. And even if he's found innocent, he has absolutely no interest in playing in Houston, and you can't really blame him. Even with Watson, on paper the Texans' offense is below average. That's in large part to a complete shortage of weapons outside of Brandon Cooks. I have a very hard time seeing the Texans repeat as the 4th best passing offense in the NFL, especially if they have to go with a backup quarterback, where I assume they'd go with 3rd-round pick Davis Mills out of Stanford to see what they've got there. Ironically, now that Houston is in complete disarray, it looks like they've finally solved their offensive line problems. Laramie Tunsil is the only star there, so it isn't a ridiculously great O-line, but the Texans shouldn't have to worry too much about protecting up front. Houston's got an absolutely brutal-looking front four, and although the linebacker unit led by Zach Cunningham should account for some of their mistakes, they'll have to be better at getting to the passer because the secondary isn't anything special either. Overall, the Texans' defense is riddled with guys who possess either not much experience, not much talent, or just guys who flat-out shouldn't be starting in the NFL. I do like Zach Cunningham at linebacker, I should say. This is about the worst situation for a coach to be inserted into, so in my opinion, we can't really judge new head coach David Culley too harshly this year. Deshaun Watson's so good by himself that if he's here, realistically this isn't the worst team in the NFL. His Houdini-like abilities will save them from history. But the Houston Texans are so bad that honestly, if he doesn't play at all this year, I wouldn't be too shocked if this was the first ever 0-17 team in NFL history. That's how bad the situation is. Next team, please. Now let's continue with the start of the next tier, the 28th ranked Cincinnati Bengals. There's no doubt that the Cincinnati Bengals will be a very fun team to watch this year. They've got rookie sensation Joe Burrow coming back, and Burrow was a menace in his first year in Cincy. Based on what I saw from Burrow in year 1 in Cincinnati, the same generational IQ and accuracy we saw at LSU should carry over to the NFL. Joe Burrow is going to be a superstar. In my opinion, a main strength of this team is its absurd collection of dangerous, young weapons. Obviously, they drafted Joe Burrow's #1 target at LSU, the true X-receiver Jamar Chase. It speaks volumes how great Justin Jefferson was as a rookie receiver last year for the Vikings, because back in 2019 at LSU when they were on the same team, Chase was the clear #1 guy. He's a physical monster, runs very good routes, and has great hands. To me, Chase was the right pick for the Bengals this year, even over a guy like Penei Sewell. Chase is joined by one of the best slot receivers in the league in Tyler Boyd, as well as T. Higgins, the big second-year guy who was such a beast with Burrow last year. They've also got Joe Mixon at running back, and he's a shifty back who can also make plays as a receiver out of the backfield. I also like what the Bengals have done in the secondary, bringing in 3 new starters in Trey Waynes, Mike Hilton, and Chidobe Awuzie to pair with one of the best free safeties in the NFL, the rangy Jesse Bates. Cincinnati has a top 10 secondary in all of the NFL, mostly thanks to Bates. The Bengals can be as good as they want on the edges of the field, but it won't really matter if they continue to have one of the worst teams in the league in the trenches. Bengals have tried to improve their offensive line, adding Riley Reif and having drafted 2 new starters in the past 2 years in Jackson Carman and Jonah Williams, but until I see major improvement on the field from the line, I'm still going to consider it a weakness. Once again, the Bengals have tried to overhaul the front seven, and that's good to see, but the linebackers are just young and not that good. Plus, the defensive line has some talent, but so does literally everyone in the NFL. They'll have to do a little bit better there. I could also see coaching being something that holds the Bengals team back, as over the past 2 years under Zach Taylor, they've lacked any sort of identity as a team and just seem to have a losing culture. Overall, the Bengals should be really fun to watch, but they'll also get bullied up front where it really matters, so I have a hard time seeing them have much success, especially in a loaded AFC North. The next team in my power rankings also has a very young and exciting quarterback, the Jacksonville Jaguars at number 27. It's clearly time for a new era in Jacksonville, as the Jags have gone from the AFC Championship game to 1 win in just 3 years, and now only 5 starters remain from that AFC Championship team. Obviously, they clicked the reset button this offseason by hiring college football legend Urban Meyer, who will try his luck in the pros again and hope for better luck this time. Oh, and they also drafted the Prince who was promised, football Jesus, etc., Trevor Lawrence from Clemson. Now, I wasn't nearly as high on Lawrence as some other people were, not because I thought he had major issues, but because I didn't think he had one outlier trait that made him a once-in-a-generation prospect. Joe Burrow did, by the way, which kind of makes him similar to Cade Cunningham in basketball this year. Both are great prospects, just not generational. That said, Lawrence has great pocket presence, football IQ, arm strength, and good legs. His accuracy isn't the best, but that'll get better. This year he'll be a strength, and I expect him to get a lot better over time. I have receiver listed as a weakness for the Jags, but honestly I don't really feel that way. I really like how the Jags have surrounded Lawrence with young electric playmakers, especially with elite deep threat DJ Chark and Rat King Laviska Shenault. The running back situation is also elite now. You'll hear the term thunder and lightning used frequently to describe James Robinson and Travis Etienne, and although that's cliche, it's a very good analogy. James Robinson is a smaller guy who burst onto the scene last year and saved my fantasy team due to his ability to break tackles. He's amazing at making a 2-yard gain turn into a 10-yard gain. On the other hand, you've got the electric Travis Etienne, who is ultra elusive and can run away from pretty much anybody. They played him almost strictly at slot receiver throughout spring camp, but I wouldn't take much stock into that, other than that they may want him to be an Alvin Kamara type guy, which he 100% has potential to become in the receiving game. The offensive line is pretty meh outside of star center Brandon Linder. It's good though. On defense, the Jaguars have some players who I really do like, but they're also riddled with holes, which is why they come in as the 29th ranked defense in the league. I like the linebacker tandem of Miles Jack, who is truly underrated, is probably Jacksonville's best player overall, and the also underrated sure tackling Joe Schobert. Like I said, I like some guys on the defense like Josh Allen, the edge Josh Allen, also Shaquille Griffin, CJ Henderson, and K'Lavon Chaisson because of their youth. Basically everywhere else on the defense is a gaping hole, which really limits what this team can be in 2021. Honestly, I see a lot of similarities between the Jaguars and the Bengals. They'll be really fun to watch and on the rise, you just may not see the results come in 2021. Now these teams are very close to each other in my rankings and are almost interchangeable, but at number 26, I have the New York Jets. First off, there's no way around it. The New York Jets were terrible last year. Much like the Jaguars, they were in desperate need of a new talent influx and a new culture, and they started by bringing in their new head coach and former 49ers defensive coordinator Robert Saleh. The only way to truly describe Saleh is that he's a football guy. He's high energy and will try to implement a culture that is both competitive and fun, which should only improve the performance on the field for the Jets. As for the new talent influx, the Jets completely overhauled the roster this offseason, starting with a new quarterback, Zach Wilson from BYU. Wilson's arm strength and accuracy is ridiculous, and that's a majority of the reason he was selected number 2 overall in the first place. It's not that the mental side of the game is a problem for Wilson, but that and getting adjusted to New York City and its media will be very important for his freshman season and forward. Now, the Jets are pretty different from your average 26th ranked team because of their projected talent in the trenches. It's unusual for bad teams to be so good on both lines, but that's what the Jets are. Mekhi Becton and Morgan Moses is one of the best tackle duos in the entire NFL, both in the pass and run blocking game, and first-round pick Elijah Vera Tucker should make a very early impact at guard. To go along with that, the Jets' front seven is very talented. It all starts with the monster known as Quinnen Williams, who has a ridiculous blend of quickness and size, and has some pretty sweet pass rush moves as well in just his second season. Quinnen ranks 80th on my top 100 players list, which I'm making a video on shortly by the way, but he can be so much higher by the end of this season because he's just scratched the surface of the ridiculous potential he has. I really like Quinnen, if you can't tell. He pairs with Foloranzu Fatukasi and Sheldon Rankins to create one of the best interior defensive lines in the NFL. It'll be very easy for Carl Lawson and company on the edge to get one-on-ones. It's just a matter of whether or not they'll win them. Jets also get C.J. Mosley back at linebacker, and Marcus May is a very underrated safety. Other than the trio of Quinnen, Mosley, and May, though, the defense is a wreck, especially at corner. New York should roll up Lasan Austin and Bryce Hall week 1, and they'd better hope there aren't injuries because, believe it or not, it could get a whole lot worse at corner. I'll just leave it at that. I have the Jets listed as 30th for receiver, but that's very low. This has the potential to be at least a middle-of-the-pack receiving core, if not better, with some very good first 4 receivers, starting with Jamison Crowder, one of the best slots in the league, the ridiculously shifty Elijah Moore out of Ole Miss, the big X-target Denzel Mims, and the new addition from the Titans, Corey Davis, who should help out New York in the red zone. In some respects, the Jets will be the polar opposite of the Cincinnati Bengals and Jacksonville Jaguars. They'll be more than fine up front on both sides of the ball, but they're playing the secondary and potentially at skill positions, mostly running back and tight end, will end up hurting them. In the end, though, all 3 teams probably won't be great this year, but it'll be a fun next decade for all 3 fan bases. And hey, they deserve it more than almost anybody. Now coming in at number 23, kind of the start of a new tier, we have the Miami Dolphins. This ranking may shock some of you as I'm way lower on the Dolphins than many people are this year, but I think I have some rather compelling points to back up this low ranking. First of all, the Dolphins went 10-6 last year, which sounds pretty good, but they did most of that by beating up on lesser teams. Miami was 9-2 against non-playoff teams and just 1-4 against playoff teams, leading me to believe last year they weren't as good of a team as their record implies. Secondly, Miami's defense, which carried them last year, is in for some pretty sizable regression. The Dolphins got by last year allowing 368 yards per game, giving them a below-average total defense, but they were successful overall because of their ability to create turnovers. The 2020 Dolphins got 29 takeaways, best in the league easily. The thing is, turnover numbers don't usually stick. The very nature of turnovers is so luck dependent, so although they have pieces on defense who are good at forcing turnovers, namely Xavier Howard, they're in for some regression in that sense. Thirdly, the Dolphins roster doesn't really jump out as me as a great roster by any means. To start on a positive note, however, they're loaded at defensive back and wide receiver. Xavier Howard is one of the best corners in the NFL due to his ability to bait quarterbacks into mistakes, and he's easily the Dolphins' best player. He's joined in the defensive backfield by a good number 2 corner in Byron Jones, 2020 first-round pick Noah Igbenogany from Auburn, seasoned vet Jason McCourty, and the instinctive rookie from Oregon, Javon Holland, who should finish second on the team in picks, probably behind Xavier Howard. Safe to say the defensive backs won't be an issue this year. I also like what the Dolphins have done at receiver. They already had a very good number 1 in Devontae Parker, and now they surround him with 2 of the fastest players in the NFL, Will Fuller, who they got from the Texans, and the electric Jalen Waddle from Bama. Add in a top 5 tight end in Mike Gesicki, who is seemingly always open and has great hands, and Tua has no shortage of weapons to work with. The problem is whether or not he'll have time to get them the ball, and even if given time, can Tua elevate the situation around him. As a rookie, Tua was a game manager in every sense of the word, and it looked like he was really trying not to make the wrong play instead of trying to make the right play. That's all well and good, but right now the Dolphins need a dynamic QB who can stretch the field and make risky throws deep down the field, because they've got the weaponry to run their offense that way. It's unclear right now whether or not Tua can be that guy in year 2, but if he can, they'll shatter this number 23 power ranking. Tua is also going to need to play Superman to some extent to get the job done this year, as the Dolphins are trying their best to build a contending offensive line around him, but at the moment, that line starts 4 players in either their second or first year, so it's going to be a little rough. The front 7 has the potential to be a problem as well, and not in a good way. Last year, these guys were blitzing and flying all over the place, and it looked awesome. It's mostly the same crew back in 2021, but the talent on paper just isn't there in the front 7, and that gives me pause. The one thing, though, that is really holding me back from going all in on saying this Dolphins team will disappoint in 2021 is head coach Brian Flores. The past 2 seasons, this man has taken over on paper one of the worst teams in NFL history and turned them into a promising 5-win team. Then last year took a roster which looked like one of the worst in the league on paper and turned it into a 10-6 team who was a Week 17 choke job away from the playoffs. Flores is not exactly a guy I want to bet against, but I'm sticking to my guns. The Dolphins will flounder in 2021. Now let's move on to the number 21 team of my power rankings, the Las Vegas Raiders. And recently, a stat was brought to my attention that really made me realize just how bad the Raiders have been of late. Since 2002, the Raiders have had 1 winning season in total, 2016 when they lost in the wild card round. That's it. That's 1 winning season in 18 years, along with an 0-1 playoff record. I mean, they've moved cities as many times in the last 18 years as they've had a winning season. Here, let me put this into more perspective for you guys. So in the last 18 years, in that time span where the Las Vegas Raiders have had one winning season, the Detroit Lions have had four, as have the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Minnesota Timberwolves. How Michigan has beaten Ohio State twice in those sad, successless 18 years. Hey, here's one last one. The last time the Raiders won a playoff game, Michael Jordan was still an NBA All-Star, and their first-round pick, Alex Leatherwood, had just turned 3 years old. In short, the Raiders need to get it right, and they need to get it right quick. Luckily, the NFL is an offensive league now, and the Raiders have the offense to right this ship. Derek Carr is the leader at QB, and although he isn't a quote-unquote difference maker like Josh Allen is for the Bills or Lamar Jackson is for the Ravens, there's no doubt in my mind that he can lead them to the playoffs. Carr has a great arm and IQ and is quietly becoming a top 10 caliber quarterback without many people noticing. He's got a good offensive line in front of him, although they do get a fair bit worse by losing three better-than-quality starters in Trent Brown, Rodney Hudson, and Gabe Jackson. Those were all avoidable losses, so I'm not really sure why they decided to trade them, but Colton Miller and Richie Incognito are still there, and they did draft Alex Leatherwood in the first round to hopefully restabilize the line. They'll lead the way for one of the better running backs in the NFL, the bruiser Josh Jacobs. At this point, Jacobs really has nothing left to prove to me because he's shown that he can break tackles with the best of them, and the Raiders will once again lean on him in the running game. They'll also lean on Darren Waller in the pass game, who is easily the third best tight end in the NFL, because he's the ultimate mismatch. Too fast and too good a route runner for any linebacker, but too big for any safety or corner. He'll have to be awesome again, though, because I don't love the wide receiver room by any means. The defense is where the problems really start. The defense was sorry last year by almost any metric and really doesn't get any better this year. I like the additions of Casey Hayward and Yannick Ngakoue, but those additions really just put lipstick on a pig, as the rest of the defense is just guys with a lot to prove. I could run through the whole depth chart and list off the problems with each and every guy on the defense, but I'll just say a plus of the defense is that it's young and has nowhere to go but up. I also really like Trayvon Mayrig at safety from TCU. Thought he was one of the steals of the draft. As I said, the Raiders are in dire need of success this year, but their defense just isn't doing it for me at all. Unless either multiple guys on that end have big-time breakout seasons, or Derek Carr goes ballistic and wins the MVP, it's hard to see Las Vegas break out of mediocrity in 2021. Next up at number 19, we have the Indianapolis Colts. The task of describing the Colts in 3 words or less really made me think, but it ended up probably being my favorite part of the video, with my description being the NFL Wisconsin Badgers. I say this for 3 reasons. They'll ground you, they'll pound you, and once they're done with that, they'll do it again, because why the hell not? To me, the Colts' strengths are very defined. It's the lines of scrimmage, especially the run game, on both sides of the ball. On offense, they return yet again one of the best offensive lines in the NFL, even with the retirement of Anthony Costanzo, because they've got solid players surrounding the best offensive lineman in all of football, Quentin Nelson. Now, I'm not going to pretend like I know everything about NFL offensive linemen, because it's a hard position to evaluate, and honestly, I trust other people to do it better than me. But if there's one offensive lineman I'm an expert on, it's Quentin Nelson. He's fundamentally sound, seemingly a smart player, and best of all from a fan's perspective, he's a bully. He's trying to pancake all 11 defensive players on every single snap, and as a fan, I love seeing that. He's unfortunately got the exact same injury as Carson Wentz, which by the way is crazy, like what are the odds? But when he gets back onto the field, it's going to be an absolute joy to watch Quentin Nelson play football. Big Q is going to team up with the rest of that outstanding line to pace the way for a great running back trio to run through. Jonathan Taylor leads the group with his outstanding vision behind the line of scrimmage, and also his ability to do it all in the open field. He can juke you, stiff arm you, run you over, or just run past you, and that should make him a top 10 running back in year 2. They've also got an outstanding receiving back, and the guy who led Indy in catches last year, Nyheim Hines. Plus, they get Marlon Mack back from an Achilles tear. The Colts running game should be very hard to stop. Also, the front 7 on defense is a huge strength for Indianapolis. DeForest Buckner is an absolute beast just like Quentin Williams in New York, and the Colts also brought in 2 edge rushers who are raw but are also athletic specimen in the first 2 rounds of the 2021 draft in Kwity Paye from Michigan and Dayo Odenigbo from Vanderbilt. The best way to describe Darius Leonard truly is the nickname the Maniac, and although he has his issues in coverage, he can wreak havoc in the offense's backfield. He teams with speedy Bobby Okereke to give the Colts a great linebacker tandem. Now, Indy's main problem will be the passing game. For starters, we think Carson Wentz should be back in time for Week 1, but having seen what happened with the whole Andrew Luck situation, I think we should wait until we see Wentz active on the football field until we make any assumptions about his health. Even when healthy, I have some serious questions about Carson as a quarterback. Yes, he was in a really bad situation last year with the Eagles, but that doesn't mean he's not at fault for what went wrong in Philly. The Eagles had the 28th ranked passing offense in the league last year and never once went over 30 points with Wentz at the helm. Wentz threw for under 6 yards per attempt and also threw 15 interceptions to just 16 touchdowns. And I get that he had Greg Ward and Travis Fulgham as his leading wide receivers at points, and his offensive line was spiraling around him. The play calling wasn't the best either. But when you watch the Eagles play, it was clear that Wentz wasn't doing anything to build up the situation around him. Instead, he was only making it worse. It's been 3 years since Wentz's near MVP season. Since that season, defenses have fed on Carson Wentz, and he has looked like the shell of a quarterback he once was. There have been enough excuses made, now it's time for the real results. Now, I will say Wentz still has the size, arm strength, and all the talent in the world to have a really good season. But I've seen far too much horrid decision-making and WTF moments over the past 3 years from him that I don't think he's earned the benefit of the doubt. And it's not as if his weapons situation gets a whole lot better in Indy, as the Colts rank 26th at receiver right now. Michael Pittman Jr. should be the main guy, and he had a great rookie year last year, but the supporting cast of an average tight end in Jack Doyle, a washed T.Y. Hilton, and an injury-prone Paris Campbell doesn't get me really excited. And I should clear up that I have coaching listed as a weakness, but it really isn't. It's only there because other than the glaring weaknesses at quarterback and receiver, there really isn't another one there for Indy. Overall, the Colts should be the same team they were last year, a team who leans on the run game and defense to carry them to a 10-win season. Only this year the fate of their season relies on Carson Wentz, which, as I've said, isn't exactly ideal. Now let's go to the 17th ranked team in my power rankings, the Los Angeles Chargers. You can make a very, very good case for the Chargers to be much higher than this on my power rankings. There's just so much to like about this team, mostly because just like their quarterback Justin Herbert, they're young, exciting, and super talented. That said, I've been burned by the Chargers before and I have my reservations about this team. First though, let's start off with the reasons to be excited about the Chargers, because there's no lack of those. It all starts, again, with the electric young Justin Herbert at quarterback. First, I'll just come out and say that I was dead wrong about Justin Herbert during my draft evaluation last year. I always knew he had an absolute cannon of an arm, was very mobile, and could be really accurate all over the field, at least in a close setting like an NFL Combine. But in college, I honestly saw Mitch Trubisky with him. At Oregon, he wasn't very successful in the slightest when not throwing a screen or tucking and running the ball, and he constantly made costly mental errors that costed Oregon games. And I'll stand by my college evaluation of him as an extremely overrated quarterback, but that's my college evaluation of him. In his first year in Los Angeles, something just clicked with Herbert. All of a sudden, he was reading the field well, making good decisions, and with the arm talent he's got, that was all that needed to happen for Herbert to go absolutely bananas in year one. And that was without a full offseason or anything, and now his situation with literally everything gets so much better. If Herbert continues to elevate his game in year 2 and beyond, he can be one of the best quarterbacks in the league one day, easily. Speaking of a situation, first of all, the Chargers finally canned head coach Anthony Lynn and brought in former Rams defensive coordinator Brandon Staley. An offensive coordinator that brought in former Saints offensive coordinator Joe Lombardi, who can now potentially stretch his offense out with a stronger arm QB. Other than head coach, the Chargers' number one concern over the past couple of years was offensive line play. In the past, the Chargers have had stacked rosters, but they've constantly been ruined by offensive lines who just couldn't keep the quarterback clean and out of trouble. That's all going to change this year as the offensive line does a complete 180 and will turn into a strength. Brian Bulaga returns at right tackle, but the entire rest of the line has been retooled and for the most part, upgraded. The two most important additions were definitely the draft steal of elite tackle prospect Rashawn Slater out of Northwestern at pick 15, and the free agency signing of center Corey Linsley from Green Bay. Slater looked extremely NFL ready at Northwestern and should be uber successful protecting Herbert's blind side in year 1 and in the future. Linsley has played at an all-pro level for a while now and will be the anchor in the middle of a very improved Charger line. Defensive line is also a big strength, mostly because of Joey Bosa and his ridiculously effective pass rush moves off the edge. To me, Bosa is the game's number 4 best edge rusher by a long shot and will make everyone else's job so much easier. I have linebacker listed as a weakness, mostly because of the youth there, but Kenneth Murray and Kaiser White could be a linebacker pair who's much better than average this year. Other than youth at linebacker, the Chargers don't really have a true weakness. Receivers listed as a weakness, but that's rather inaccurate. Herbert has plenty of weapons to work with, starting with one of the best route runners in the league, Keenan Allen. I don't think Allen is a top 10 wide receiver like most people do, but I've got to respect his game as an elite target underneath. Mike Williams is Allen's polar opposite as a big-body deep threat, and Jared Cook is a good receiving tight end to implement with those guys. Austin Eckler also ranks among the best receiving backs in the NFL coming out of the backfield, so I'm expecting the receivers to exceed their 18th ranking. It's worth noting that the secondary is young, but I'm sure Asante Samuel, Nasir Adderley, and others can produce good results there. Oh, also they got Derwin James, who when healthy is easily one of the most fun players to watch in the NFL, and arguably the best safety in the league. The best way to describe him is electric. Finally, coaching is listed as a weakness, but I'm sure the coaching will be fine. It's just that it's a new staff, so there have to be questions with that inherently. I think the Chargers could be a legit playoff team if everything goes well this year, but one of the main reasons they come in at 17th is health. It seems like the Chargers keep getting seasons derailed with injuries, and whether it's a poor medical staff, which explains the Tyrod Taylor situation last year, or a cast of injury-prone players like Austin Eckler, Mike Williams, Brian Bulaga, Joey Bosa, Chris Harris Jr., and Derwin James, just to name a few, something's got to change there. If it does, look out. The Chargers could be special. Let's go on to the 16th ranked team on my power rankings, the Denver Broncos. On paper, the Denver Broncos look absolutely loaded this year. This offseason, GM George Patton has quietly turned this into one of the top rosters in football, and if they had pulled the Aaron Rodgers trade off earlier in the offseason, they were going to be an instant Super Bowl contender. Unfortunately, that didn't happen, and here we sit a month before the season starts with the Broncos at number 16 in my power rankings. But let's start off with the things that are good with this team, because the Broncos have plenty of strengths. First off, they have the best defensive backfield in all of football at the moment. This offseason, Denver gave the cornerback room a complete overhaul, first bringing in proven vets in Kyle Fuller and Ronald Darby to man the boundaries. Then they selected the best corner prospect to come into the draft in a long time, with Patrick Surtain II out of Alabama at pick 9. Should they have taken Justin Fields? Yes, by all means, that was the right pick. But on face value, Surtain is an absolute lockdown guy who should shoulder the CB2 responsibilities year one and will hopefully develop into one of the best cornerbacks in all of the NFL. Not to mention they've got the guy who many say is the best slot corner in the league in Bryce Callahan. If he's able to stay healthy, the cornerback room is absolutely stacked. Denver also features the best safety tandem in the NFL with Justin Simmons and Kareem Jackson. Simmons is arguably the best safety in the NFL, and due to his crazy range, ball skills, and coverage instincts, is definitely the best free safety in the NFL. Kareem Jackson is a big-time thumper and brings the boom to that tandem. Now that I've adequately covered the defensive backs, I'd like to say that the weaponry is pretty stacked for Drew Lock too. Courtland Sutton couldn't stay healthy last year, but when healthy, he's an elite jump ball threat who Drew Lock can just throw the ball up to and trust he can come down with it. Tim Patrick is almost the same thing and had an absolute breakout year last year. They've also got two elite second-year receivers with one of the best route runners in the league in Jerry Jeudy already, and an elite deep threat in KJ Hamler. Noah Fant is a good complement to those guys as a mismatched tight end with real wheels. To even further elaborate on those weapons, I really like the running back room. We know Melvin Gordon is a good steady veteran presence who can still make plays, but they also drafted Javonte Williams out of North Carolina. Williams has great vision, can make you miss, and can flat out run dudes over. When he gets rolling, he's like a tank, and I suggest you go look up some of his highlights on YouTube right now because it's so fun to watch. But please return to this video after. The front 7 and O-line aren't listed as strengths, but realistically, the Broncos are fine there even if they aren't amazing. Unfortunately for the Broncos, the two spots where they're the weakest are the two spots where you really don't want to be weak in the NFL: quarterback and coach. Now, Drew Lock has shown some flashes, but I really just need to see the results at this point. He has all the arm strength and moxie, but just isn't the most accurate QB at the moment, and too often makes ill-fated decisions to the point where he's a pretty big burden to this roster. If he doesn't show improvement at the start of the year, they'll probably have to throw in Teddy Bridgewater, and let's be honest, Teddy probably isn't taking them much further than the wild card round at best. It's just what he is at this point. I also have questions about Denver's coaching, as they've had good rosters the past couple of years, but Vic Fangio hasn't really been able to do anything with them, injuries or not. Now, the NFL is run by who has the best coach and who has the best quarterback, which doesn't bode great for Denver. But if said coach and QB can get it figured out, this roster can carry the Broncos to a sweet season. Okay, before we move on to the next team, the Pittsburgh Steelers at 14, I should say that the Steelers just actually made a move where they're trading their 6th-round pick in 2022 to the Jaguars for Joe Schobert. That made a little bit of a mix-up in my power rankings, where the Jaguars are now going to move up to, or back to 29th, and the Bengals are going to move up to 28th in my power rankings. That's how close those teams were. But that's the only major switch up in my power rankings. So now let's get into the Steelers. And so last year with the Steelers, the wheels fell off the wagon. There's no way around it. And we really should have known it was bound to happen. All the signs were there. The 2020 Steelers were a great defense and an okay offense, who got by looking like a powerhouse because they played a slew of injured, frail teams who played no defense in the first place. The good thing is, they were exposed as frauds early on enough in the season that they've now had time to realize what went wrong and hopefully regroup and get it right this time around. The good thing is that not much will change from the attacking Blitzburg defense that was so dominant last year, at least not in the front seven. Cameron Hayward anchors a three-man front that should be absolutely dominant against the run and the pass, allowing for more freedom for the more challenged back end. Cameron Hayward, Stephon Tuitt, and Tyson Alualu form the fourth best interior defensive line in the league, just making things easy for TJ Watt. Watt has a very good argument for being the best edge rusher in the league thanks to his 42.5 sacks over the last 3 seasons alone. Watt may not be the freak athlete that Khalil Mack, Myles Garrett, or Danielle Hunter are, but he's arguably the most technically sound pass rusher in the league, making him almost impossible to stop in a one-on-one. Not to mention, he's among the best run-stopping edge rushers in the NFL. Devin Bush returns as well and is a much welcome returnee as a playmaking linebacker, and obviously they just traded for Joe Schobert, who will team with him. The only reason the Steelers' defense isn't the best in the NFL is the poor-looking secondary. Actually, I'll leave the safeties out of this. Minkah Fitzpatrick is a tad overrated in my eyes, because I think he benefits a lot from playing behind such a talented front seven, but I will say that Minkah plays his role so well as a roaming free safety, constantly making plays on the ball. He's extremely extensual and athletic, which suits him very well for that role. He's definitely a borderline top 5 safety. The cornerback room is where the problems really are on the defense, though. The starters should be Joe Hayden and Cameron Sutton, which doesn't get me excited in the slightest. Not to mention the corner depth is very lacking. If the downfall of this defense comes in 2021, it will definitely be because the corners weren't able to hold up their end of the bargain. As good as the defense was last year, the offense just couldn't keep up, especially at the end of the season against good defenses. I'm afraid that may happen again this year. It all starts with Big Ben at quarterback, and although Ben isn't terrible, I feel like his limitations are dragging this team down. Roethlisberger is a bit like Phillip Rivers was last year. He's still a veteran and a smart QB who is very accurate up to about 15 yards down the field, but as soon as you ask him to consistently throw 15-plus yard passes, bad things start to happen. The Steelers have been able to construct an offense around that skill set with lots of short passing concepts and a bunch of receivers who are good after the catch, and Deontay Johnson, Juju Smith-Schuster, and Chase Claypool, but I think that system that the Steelers run has a bit of a cap ceiling-wise. You can only be so good as an offense these days without a consistent downfield passing attack, and that's exactly what Pittsburgh is lacking. It's not as if the Steelers could implement that downfield passing attack either, thanks to Ben's limitations. See the problem? Maybe the only way to fix the Steelers' offense is by getting a running game that consistently asserts pressure on the defense and makes life easier on the passing game. That's something the Steelers didn't have last year when they had the worst-ranked rushing offense in football. Pittsburgh did upgrade at running back by bringing in the beast Najee Harris out of Alabama. Harris does it all. He's 230 pounds and therefore can run over / stiff arm pretty much any defender in his path, but is also unfairly speedy and elusive for a man his size, kind of similar to Jonathan Taylor. Just think of his hurdle versus Notre Dame in the college football playoff. That's what Najee Harris can do. He's also a weapon out of the backfield with an outstanding catch radius. He'll make an immediate impact wherever he's needed. That is, if the offensive line can block for him. Arguably the biggest weakness on the entire Steelers roster is the offensive line. To quote Pat McAfee, they've gone from the penthouse to the outhouse real quick, and David DeCastro is the only member left of the offensive lines of 5 years ago who were so dominant. The starting 5 this year should be DeCastro, Zach Banner, Chukwuma Okorafor, Kendrick Green, and Kevin Dotson. That's not good. They'll need to improve greatly and quickly if the Steelers' offense has any hope this year. After that long preview, maybe the Steelers don't seem like the best team on paper. They've got a limited offense who is average at best across the board, and a defense dragged down by a terrible secondary who is hypothetically in for some major regression. But any team coached by Mike Tomlin has a chance, and they can only hope Tomlin can work his magic yet again, or it could be a long season in Pittsburgh. Now let's move on to my 10th ranked team, the New England Patriots. Okay, so the New England Patriots just had a losing season. Let me repeat that again. The New England Patriots just had a losing season. Let me show you just how crazy that fact is. Since the end of Bill Belichick's second season in New England in 2000, the Patriots have only had winning seasons. Keep in mind, that's not counting 500 seasons. That's only winning seasons, 9-7 or better. Just pure winning, as if Boston sports fans needed more reasons to be hateable. What's more, in 13 of those 20 straight winning seasons, the Patriots at least made the conference championship game. In 9 of them, they made it to the Super Bowl, and in 6 of them, they won the whole thing. Before last year, the last time the Patriots had a non-winning season, LeBron James was a freshman at St. Vincent St. Mary's High School in Akron, Ohio, averaging 18 points per game. That's just how long ago it was. And now the Patriots are met with something they aren't too familiar with, a major setback. Luckily, there's one guy in the NFL that I trust more than anyone to deal with that kind of a setback. It's Bill Belichick. Definitely the biggest reason New England still ranks in the top 10 is that they've got the ultimate X factor in Bill Belichick. And to me, it's clear as day that the man is the greatest coach in NFL history. Over the years, the two constants were always Tom Brady and Bill Belichick in New England, and no matter what else changed, Bill was always able to make it work. No, he can't play on the field, so that may be a knock as to how much of an impact he can have, but having Belichick just gives the Patriots the ultimate benefit of the doubt, the knowing that they will always be more prepared than the team on the other sideline, and I can't stress enough how important that is. And it's not as if Bill's working with some crap roster that can't fend for themselves. He's got some elite pieces to work with, starting in the secondary. First off, the corner tandem is truly elite. Stephon Gilmore had a rough 2020, but last year for him was riddled with injuries, and he really just didn't look like himself. I fully expect Gilmore to return to his lockdown, best DB in the NFL type form of 2021, if not at least make the best corner in the AFC East argument, a very interesting debate between him and Xavier Howard. Speaking of Howard, the only player that came close to his 10 interceptions last year was the Pats' own J.C. Jackson, who had 9, mostly in Gilmore's absence. With Gilmore back to his lockdown form, I expect more picks to start rolling in for Jackson, with QBs desperately looking to the other side of the field. The Devin McCourty and Adrian Phillips safety duo isn't amazing, but it sure is good enough to give New England the second best secondary in the NFL going into the season. You'll see at the very bottom of the screen that New England ranks as my number one defense in the NFL going into 2021, mostly because of Belichick in the secondary, but also because of a new, revamped linebacker core that ranks second in the whole NFL. Dante Hightower opted out last year and Kyle Van Noy was on the Dolphins, but oddly enough, both were starters on the 2019 defense and are reunited this year. Hightower is a thumper and physical freak, but has also gained veteran wisdom as his career has progressed. I expect him to return and show the NFL he's back to being a clear top 10 linebacker, passing the Zach Cunninghams and Devin Whites of the world. Van Noy is very versatile and brings great energy to the squad as well. The Pats also bring in Matthew Judon as a veteran pass rushing threat off the edge. I like what Juwan Bentley developed into in Hightower's absence as well. The linebacking core should be back and should be special. Like the Steelers though, the Pats are awesome on defense but have major problems on offense, particularly in the passing game. I have them ranked at 31st for quarterback, and I'm sure they'll end up higher than that, but I'm just not sure who's going to emerge as a starter. Belichick has said Cam Newton's their guy, but oddly, Cam has the exact same limitations as Ben Roethlisberger for Pittsburgh. He's just not an accurate quarterback at all, especially throwing the ball down the field. Cam obviously adds an extra aspect to the running game because he's still such a big guy to try and bring down, but he's not nearly the same runner he once was, and we saw what happened when he was in charge of the offense last year. The weapons weren't at his favor, yes, but what happened wasn't pretty. On the other hand, you've got the rookie Mac Jones, and honestly, I don't know if it's the right situation to drop him into this year. Jones is plenty smart and accurate, but I still think he'd definitely benefit from a year of sitting behind Cam and learning how to play in a system where his deck isn't so stacked like it was at Alabama. With an elite running game, great play caller, 10 seconds to throw every play, and Devontae Smith and Jalen Waddle running wide open 40 yards down the field every play. That takes some getting used to. I'm also not a big fan of the receiving core, especially a wide receiver, where the starters look to be some mixture of Jacoby Myers, Nelson Aguilar, N'Keal Harry, and Kendrick Bourne. Yuck. That said, the tight end group is one of the best in the NFL now that New England brought in a great possession receiver in Hunter Henry and a more speedy threat in Jonnu Smith. I'm excited to see how those two mesh as a group. New England is hoping that they can lean on the run game for more offensive production and ultimately to open up the pass game. The group of Damian Harris, Sony Michel, and James White obviously doesn't feature a star, but it's also a solid mixture of skill sets. What really sets the run game for me is the offensive line. The starting tackle duo of Trent Brown and Isaiah Wynn is elite and will help protect either Cam or Mac, whoever it is. And the interior offensive line grouping of Shaq Mason, David Andrews, and Michael Onwenu is full of maulers and guys who will clear up absolutely massive holes for the running backs. Pats have, in my opinion, the fourth best line in all of the NFL, which is maybe their one true strength on offense outside of tight end. Pats are kind of a weird team, as their biggest strength on offense, the line, is also their biggest weakness on defense. I don't hate New England's D-line, and I'm sure they'll be absolutely fine, especially with such a great coverage group on the back end, but right now I'm certainly not wowed by that group. If young guys like Chase Winovich and rookies like Christian Barmore from Alabama and Ronnie Perkins from Oklahoma get their opportunities and play to their potential, this unit will far outperform their 26th ranking. This year's New England Patriots are out to prove that they're more than just Bill Belichick and Tom Brady. It's certainly a new-look team, and they may not appear as stacked on paper as the old Pats, but make no mistake, the Patriots are not a team to be slept on in 2021. As you can probably tell, the team previews are starting to get a little bit longer at this point in the video, and that's going to continue at number 9 with the Cleveland Browns. It's ironic that we go from the Patriots to the Browns because the two teams' recent histories are polar opposites. For years upon years, Cleveland has been a sewage dump where football careers go to die, but finally, last year, everything seemed to change. The 2020 Browns had pretty much no weaknesses as a team and played a bruising style that energized all of Cleveland behind them. Going into Heinz Field and trouncing the Steelers in the playoffs on national TV for all the world to see is the highlight of recent Browns history, and they only hope to build off of that this year after having yet another great offseason and returning locked and loaded for what some folks believe could be the Browns' first trip to the Super Bowl in franchise history. If Cleveland is to make that kind of a run in the postseason, the pounding run game will likely be what takes them there. It's no coincidence that the year after the Browns bring in the Shanahan-type system with Kyle Stefanski, this team's success skyrockets, largely due to the running game. Everywhere that system goes, it seems to work. The way the outside zone run pairs so perfectly with the play action just throws off defenses, and especially linebackers, into major issues. But I'm not sure any other team in the league is better equipped for the type of running system the Browns use than the Browns themselves. First off, they've got the best running back room in the league. It's obviously led by Nick Chubb, who's probably the second hardest runner in the NFL behind Derrick Henry. At 5'11" and almost 230 pounds of muscle, Chubb doesn't go down with just arm tackles. What makes him so hard to stop, though, is the threat of his power and his elusiveness. Just when you think he's about to run through someone, Chubb can hit you with a mean juke and get past a defender untouched. Just like Derrick Henry, he's sneaky fast too. He effortlessly runs away from defensive backs who cannot believe a 230-pounder can move that well, and I don't blame him. Just on top of that, Cleveland has a top 10 running back in Kareem Hunt to back him up. Hunt, too, has an outstanding mix of power and elusiveness, and is also one of the best receiving backs in the NFL. Maybe the best trait that both of them have, though, is that even though they can effortlessly break tackles and make house calls, they are always patient, waiting for blocks to set up in front of them, and are willing not to try and bounce every run off to the edge. That's what makes all of this work, and not all good running backs are willing to do that. Speaking of the blocking in front of Chubb and Hunt, the offensive line for the Browns is the best in the league. The tackle duo that they added last year of Jack Conklin and sophomore Jedrick Wills of Alabama was amazing last year. Those two helped drop Baker's sack total from 40 to 26 last year. Those two will be back and should be even better this year. The interior of the Browns O-line is even better, with 3 superstars in Joe Bitonio, near top 100 player J.C. Treader, and true top 80 player Wyatt Teller at guard. Those guys are all nasty run blockers and clear gigantic holes for Chubb and Hunt to run through. Needless to say, the run game is the strength of the Browns team. The passing game won't be nearly as good as the run game, but it'll still be more than good enough. Baker Mayfield returns at quarterback as the ultimate game manager. Now, many Browns fans love Baker more than life itself, so I know Browns Nation won't appreciate that, but saying Baker is a game manager to me isn't an insult. Baker has shown an ability to be his own offense and make plays when the game was breaking down around him, but he's better in a role where he can diagnose the defense with his great football IQ, then have a straightforward system of options to throw to because he'll always be able to put the ball in the right place for receivers. Baker may be a quote-unquote system QB this year, but he runs the system perfectly and will always be a plus for Cleveland. Okay, Browns fans, was that good enough? But maybe the only weakness for the Browns on offense is their receiving core. OBJ and Landry is a good tandem but is also frequently injured. They'll need to be back out on the field the whole season for this offense to reach its full potential. The tight end group is really nice, with a good mixture of skill sets in the 2 possession receivers Austin Hooper and Harrison Bryant, and the speedier guy in David Njoku. Even the defense could be among the best in the NFL if everything goes well. The line should be awesome, led by one of the most dominant freaks of nature in the NFL, Myles Garrett. Myles Garrett was built in a lab, with his insane combination of unhuman-like strength and elite fast-twitch quickness off the snap. Garrett's got the perfect build to be an elite NFL edge rusher, with his length, size, strength, speed, quickness, bend. Not to mention he's mastered a couple of pass rush moves, which is all he needs to be absolutely unstoppable off the edge. Cleveland also added Jadeveon Clowney in the offseason to make sure Garrett isn't alone in his efforts to get to the quarterback. That's now 2 number 1 overall picks they've got off the edge. The Browns also possess a borderline top 10 secondary, which was probably the defense's biggest weakness last year. Denzel Ward is easily a top 10 corner due to his top-tier athleticism and ball skills. He will lock down one side of the field if he can stay healthy, while first-round pick Greg Newsome out of Northwestern, who fits a very similar profile to Ward, will man the other. They've also got Greedy Williams, a steal in the 2019 second round, who could step in should health or performance be an issue for either guy. Cleveland's safety room is completely revamped as well, with the addition of an elite tackling box safety in John Johnson from the Rams. He's extremely smart and has good ability to go sideline to sideline, making plays around the line of scrimmage. He's a top 15 safety. Grant Delpit, yet another steal from LSU in the secondary, will start at free safety, and technically his first year after an Achilles injury derailed his first. Linebacker is the only below-average position group on this team, and even there, they got the steal of the draft in, again, the second round this year, with Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah out of Notre Dame. I thought JOK was a top 10 caliber guy because of his rare combination of size and movement and tackling skills. He'll immediately be a difference maker wherever Cleveland wants to put him. The Browns have finally emerged from the gutter as stacked as any team in the NFL. If they can handle having expectations for the first time in forever and add in the new guys with ease, the Super Bowl takes for the Cleveland Browns may not be so outlandish after all. Okay, now let's move on to my number 8th ranked team, the Tennessee Titans. And the Tennessee Titans were by far the easiest team to describe in 3 words or less for me. It's just freaking stacked offensively. The Titans may have their issues on defense, but I don't care. Other than the Seahawks, the Titans are my favorite team going into 2021, and I'm 100%, no shame, rooting for them to do awesome this year. Without further ado, let's talk about this offense, because when I say they're freaking stacked on offense, I mean it. We're going to start with the quarterback Ryan Tannehill, who I think is one of the more underrated QBs in the league. Tannehill gets a lot of hate because he's supposedly reliant on Derrick Henry and the system that he's in, but I think that number 1, that's not true, and number 2, who cares? Tannehill is just about the perfect quarterback you could ask for to run this Titans offense. He's smart, crafty, has a great arm, and is very accurate, even deep down the field. Now it's clear Tannehill can't make something out of absolutely nothing like the best of the best can, but am I crazy for saying he's on the same level as Dak Prescott and even Tom Brady? I don't think so. Ryan Tannehill's been too good for too long now for people to still write him off as a fluke made by the system. He deserves his respect. The bad news for Tannehill this year is that it's going to be even easier for his haters to write him off as a product of the talent around him than ever before. And can you really blame them? I mean, look at the picture that I've got up there. The Tennessee Titans have Julio Jones, A.J. Brown, and Derrick Henry on the same offense. That's video game stuff. It's flat out not fair. So first of all, we all know exactly who Derrick Henry is. He's an absolute tank who will destroy everything in his sight, not too dissimilar to an enraged bull or even Godzilla. I'm stating the obvious, but you don't want to get in the man's way, plain and simple. And as if it wasn't already enough that he could beat a fully grown bear in a fight, he's known to run away from defensive backs too. Even more so than Nick Chubb, I always see defensive backs forget how fast Derrick Henry is in the open field and take terrible angles that lead to their demise, and it's comical, because a man that big shouldn't be able to move that fast, plain and simple. Given what I just said, there shouldn't be an argument that he's the best running back in the NFL, case in point. Then you've got maybe the best wide receiver duo we've seen in the NFL in maybe a decade. I'm not kidding. That's how good the Julio Jones-A.J. Brown duo is. We're not witnessing Julio at the peak of his powers anymore, but he's still an absolute freak of nature. The guy is 6'3", 220 pounds, and runs a sub-4 440, all while being one of the best route runners in the NFL and having elite hands. Even if he's old and injury-prone, trading a second and a fourth for him is one of the greatest fleecings in NFL history, and completely shifted my perspective on the Titans this year. But don't expect Julio to overshadow A.J. Brown in any kind of way this year. I think Brown was one of the most underrated receivers in the NFL, and he'll burst onto the scene as a clear top 5 receiver in 2021. Athletically, he's a freak of nature. He's always overshadowed in the one workout picture with him and DK Metcalf, rightfully so because Metcalf's a menace in that picture. But you sometimes forget how physically imposing Brown is. He's either way stronger or way faster than almost any defensive back in the NFL, which makes it easy for him to get by not being the greatest route runner of all time, even though he's no slouch there either, much better than Metcalf. Brown also has great hands and just constantly imposes his will on the opposing corner. I'm so excited for him to show everyone what he's about next year. I have a hard time seeing defenses stop Derrick Henry, A.J. Brown, and Julio Jones in the Shanahan system Tennessee runs, but if someone somehow can, there isn't much else after those guys other than the nice number 3 guy in Josh Reynolds. The offensive line blocking for Henry and company is also borderline top 10, with big maulers in Ben Jones, Nate Davis, and Roger Saffold up front, who have recently emerged as guys who will pave the way for Derrick Henry, as well as solid pass protectors in Taylor Lewan and early second-round pick Dylan Radunz at tackle. The Titans' offense should be impossible to stop. The question is whether or not their 22nd ranked defense can stop anybody. Tennessee had a real tough time generating any sort of pressure last year, which is why they brought in free agency additions Denico Autry from Indianapolis and Bud Dupree from Pittsburgh. Those two additions are especially good because not only do they help the Titans, but they also hurt two of their main competitors in the Colts and Steelers. Dupree and Autry pair with a real underrated pass rushing D tackle in Jeffrey Simmons, who can wreak havoc on opposing offenses. The pass rush should be much improved this year. I'm excited about Jayon Brown and Rashaan Evans at linebacker as well. Defensive back should hypothetically be the weakest point for the Titans, but even there, I see definite signs of potential improvement. They've still got Kevin Byard, who had a real rough 2020, but hopes to return to form this year as the great ball-hawking free safety he is, and a borderline top 10 safety. Even the cornerback room has a lot of reasons to be optimistic, particularly that it's a completely different group than the one that got absolutely torched often last year. The Titans made it clear that an overhaul at corner this offseason was necessary, and I really like what they did. First off, they brought in Janoris Jenkins from free agency as a good veteran presence to aid the young guys, those guys being Caleb Farley, Elijah Molden, and Christian Fulton. Farley was a first-round pick from Virginia Tech this year who is long, rangy, athletic, and has great ball skills. He's the whole package to start opposite Jenkins this year. Molden was highly regarded as the best slot corner in this class out of Washington, and we know how important those can be with the types of shifty guys teams love to use now in the NFL. Fulton was a projected first-rounder who they stole in the second out of LSU last year, and he hopes to earn a role alongside Farley later this year. All in all, Tennessee will be among the best offensive teams in the entire league, and the defense looks very passable. Clearly, Mike Vrabel is willing to go to extreme limits to win the Super Bowl, potentially even chopping off certain vital body parts, so we'll see if that can pay off for Tennessee in 2021. Now let's head on to the true upper echelon of the AFC, starting with the Buffalo Bills at number 4. Last year, the Buffalo Bills took the ultimate next step needed to go from a perennial playoff team to a Super Bowl contender. They went from an elite roster held back by terrible quarterback play to a still elite roster now elevated by their quarterback. This team now lives and dies on the shoulders of Josh Allen, and based on what we saw last year, that sounds like a pretty good recipe for success. In Allen's first 2 years in Buffalo, he looked like Justin Herbert at Oregon to some extent, where he was really just a rocket arm. In those years, Allen displayed special arm strength and elite mobility, but not much else. That all changed last year under offensive coordinator Brian Daboll, where Allen magically became a very smart and accurate passer in just an offseason. There's something to be said for such an enormous breakthrough in one season as a potential fluke, but based on the traits we saw on display last year, I doubt that. If last year's any indication, Josh Allen is an absolute superstar in the making, and he can carry this Bills offense to new heights this year, especially given the slew of receivers he's got. Stephon Diggs leads the receiving corps as a first-tier superstar thanks to his ridiculous route running. The guy's practically uncoverable one-on-one, just like Myles Garrett or TJ Watt on defense, makes everyone else's job so much easier because of all the defensive attention he receives. Cole Beasley may be an anti-vax stooge, but he's a damn good slot receiver, and I like the addition of the still speedy Emmanuel Sanders on the outside. He or second-year stud Gabriel Davis will slot in at receiver 3. The Bills' passing game should be great, but the running game could potentially be questionable. Devin Singletary and Zach Moss are fine at running back, but the offensive line ahead of them isn't great. There isn't really one true weakness to point to on the O-line, but there also isn't a true strength other than maybe Deion Dawkins at tackle. Offensive line won't be a huge weakness, but it certainly won't be a strength, especially in the run game. Now defensively, the Bills are once again stacked to the gills and should be among the league's most stout defenses. It all starts with Sean McDermott, the aggressive, defensive-oriented head coach. I like McDermott as much more than just a glorified DC, but he plays that role perfectly anyway. He leads the third-ranked defense in the National Football League, anchored by the third-best secondary. Tre'Davious White is an aggressive corner who can sometimes let up a big play, but also makes plays in the backfield and breaks up a lot of passes to make up for it. He's arguably a top 5 corner in this league, and will have one side of the field on lockdown at all times. For a while now, Buffalo has been struggling trying to find a guy to man the other side opposite White, and it's unclear whether or not Levi Wallace is that guy this year. That said, the safety tandem is elite as well. Jordan Poyer is the better of the two as a guy who does it all at a high level. He has good coverage instincts, is athletic, and makes plays around the line of scrimmage. Micah Hyde is kind of more of the same, just on a tier below Poyer. Either way, those two guys are great at free and strong safety. The linebacker duo of Matt Milano and Tremaine Edmonds is something to look forward to as well, where Edmonds is constantly making plays in the backfield due to his freakish athleticism, and Matt Milano is a lead in coverage. The defensive line is the only potential issue on defense, and it's yet to be seen whether or not the concerns there hold any merit. Every starter from the group last year that had trouble pressuring the QB is back, which is just meh. Nobody other than the underrated Jerry Hughes really gets me all that excited on the defensive line. That is until the draft. In the first and second round, the Bills grabbed two insanely athletic project types in Greg Rousseau from Miami and Boogie Basham from Wake Forest. Rousseau was a projected top 5 pick due to his freakish length plus good strength and bend before he opted out of his junior year to focus on going pro. He's a dark horse defensive rookie of the year candidate for me. Basham is more of a polished guy with quickness and strength who should make more of an immediate impact. To me, the defensive line should be just fine. Overall, the Buffalo Bills are a stacked roster who is now elevated due to elite quarterback play. The team is good enough to the point where if they don't make the Super Bowl, the season will have been a disappointment. Buckle in, Bills fans. It's going to be a wild ride. Now let's move on to the second best team in the AFC, thus giving away the first best team in the AFC. Second best is the Baltimore Ravens at number 3. The Ravens just can't seem to get over the hump and make a deep run in the playoffs. Year after year, the Ravens have been stacked and appear to be one of the best teams in the league, but come playoff time, something always seems to happen to derail Baltimore. And nobody's without blame in this. Everyone on this Ravens team, including Lamar Jackson, including John Harbaugh, including the secondary, etc., needs to get it together in the playoffs, or always wonder what could have been with the Baltimore Ravens. Luckily, Baltimore has all the pieces in play to have another very successful season. Let's start with the oh-so-underrated Lamar Jackson at quarterback. For the longest time now, I've been a Lamar Jackson hater because of the 2019 season where he won the MVP trophy over my favorite player, Russell Wilson. But this offseason, the hate I've seen him get all over social media has made me change my tune on him in a big way. In just his second year as the Ravens quarterback last year, Lamar led the team with no weapons at receiver to the 7th best scoring offense in the league while ranking top 10 in most quarterback efficiency metrics like QBR. Keep in mind that's a passing metric. As a pure passer, I'll admit Lamar isn't the best. He's mediocre to above average in terms of accuracy and can sometimes get flustered by better defenses who can put more pressure on it. Lamar isn't a bad passer by any means, but I'll just say if he had Tom Brady's mobility, the Ravens wouldn't be anywhere near the 9th best offense in the NFL. Luckily, Lamar doesn't have Tom Brady's mobility. In fact, he's the best running quarterback in NFL history by a wide margin. Jackson is good enough as a runner to the point where if he switched positions and became a true running back, he'd be a solid starter in this league. Simply put, Lamar is an electric runner. He's crazy fast and secure with the ball, but more importantly, there isn't a defender in the NFL who can tackle him single-handedly in a one-on-one in the open field like an Oklahoma drill. It's just impossible. Lamar is so ridiculously elusive that I'm sure he's ended multiple careers by just snapping someone's ankles out of their body with that now you see me, now you don't move. And what annoys me more than anything is people that say Lamar's playing style is unsustainable. At this point, it clearly is. Lamar now has consistently led elite scoring offenses without great supporting cast in recent years, and the notion that defenses will at some point catch on to what he does is absolute insanity. Has he recently shown any signs of slowing down? Because if he does, show me the proof. Lamar Jackson is a top 5 quarterback and the engine to this team. If Lamar stays healthy this whole year, the Ravens will be in the thick of things no matter what because that's just who he is. The Ravens should no doubt repeat as having the best run game in the NFL this year. Lamar is such a threat as a runner that he makes everyone else's job so much easier because defenses just can't put the same amount of focus onto the running backs as they can for the Cleveland Browns, for example, because Baker isn't that kind of a running threat. Speaking of the running back room, it's very young and talented. J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards both really know how to get downfield and pick up hard yards inside. That's good because the Ravens run a lot of read option where the goal is to either get Lamar to the open field on the outside or pound ahead for a solid gain inside. Dobbins has a little extra ability as a home run threat as well, which he hopefully shows off this year. Ahead of Jackson, Dobbins, and Edwards is an elite offensive line leading the way. Ronnie Stanley is one of the best tackles in the league and is back to protect Lamar's blind side. The Ravens also brought in good run blockers Ben Cleveland and Kevin Zeitler at guard and stole Alejandro Villanueva from the Steelers to start across from Stanley at right tackle. I think receiver is probably Baltimore's biggest weakness on offense, but there's something to be said for the retooling job Harbaugh and company did this offseason there. Hollywood Brown was the one constant as a speedy deep threat on the outside, but the Ravens brought in the also speedy Sammy Watkins, Devin Duvernay, and Tylan Wallace this offseason, so Brown must be much more than just a gadget guy for Baltimore this year. They're clearly already stacked in that department. The Ravens also drafted Rashad Bateman from Minnesota at the end of the first round. Bateman is yet another deep threat, but he relies more on his elite route running and hands than his speed. I'm expecting big things from Bateman in 2021. Mark Andrews returns too as a top 5 tight end in the league. He's a great possession guy and red zone threat because of his good route running, massive catch radius, and great hands. Once again, the offense is great, but the defense is even better. The NFL's 5th-ranked defense is led by its 4th-ranked secondary. Marlon Humphrey and Marcus Peters once again combined to make the best corner tandem in the league. Humphrey is my 7th-ranked corner in the league, and though I'm lower on him than some, I'll still say Marlon's athleticism, big playmaking ability, and especially his versatility make him the best defender on the team. Peters is my 10th ranked corner in the league, and that's because he can jump routes at an elite level and thus create turnovers, but he gives up a little too many big plays for my liking. I'm not a fan of Peters' ultra-aggressive mindset because he can let down his team too often, but I have to admit it's been successful for him recently. Chuck Clark and Deshaun Elliott at safety or whatever. The front seven should be back and should be really good again. Although I'm not as excited about Calais Campbell, Derek Wolfe, and Brandon Williams as I once was, those guys are still very good defenders and will especially make the Ravens super stout against the run. The linebacker core is young throughout and led by second-year breakout star out of LSU, Patrick Queen. Queen led the team with 105 tackles, and his sure tackling plus his freakish athleticism will prime him for another great year. Odafe Oweh, formerly Jason Oweh out of Penn State, is also someone to watch on the edge. He wasn't the most productive at Penn State, but if there's one team I trust to get the most out of a long, strong, quick, and speedy edge rusher, it's got to be the Baltimore Ravens. Oweh is another dark horse defensive rookie of the year guy. It should also be worth mentioning that the Ravens have the #1 special teams unit for the year because of their ultra-reliable kicker Justin Tucker, stud punter Sam Koch, and great return specialist Devin Duvernay, Hollywood Brown, and Sammy Watkins. Duvernay is probably the best there. Finally, the Ravens coaching is elite. John Harbaugh's been doing this thing for a long time, and he knows what he's doing. The Ravens have appeared unprepared in several recent playoff losses, but I'm going to assume that's a blip on the radar, not a trend moving forward. Once again, the Ravens will be very good, even great, but it's about being better than great. Everyone's got to step up, and this team can reach great heights. Once again, it's Super Bowl or bust for Baltimore in 2021. And now finally, after about an hour, we finally move on to the #1 ranked team in the AFC and the #2 ranked team overall, Kansas City Chiefs. The Chiefs are in the middle of a 3-year reign of terror that doesn't look like it's ending anytime soon. Other than a couple of Week 17 losses where the starters didn't play, they are 26-4 in the regular season the past 2 seasons, and 38-8 in the last 3. In those 3 years, they are also undefeated in the playoffs against non-Tom Brady teams. And to say KC is back and ready for more is an understatement. The offense returns or replaces pretty much every important piece and should once again be one of the best in NFL history. For starters, Patrick Mahomes is already one of the best quarterbacks peak-wise in NFL history. And honestly, I feel good saying there has never been anyone in the history of the world who can throw a football better than Patrick Mahomes. Doesn't matter if he's in the process of being sacked, whipping a no-look 50-yard bomb into double coverage, he's going to hit his target. If you're watching this video, it's very likely you know exactly what Mahomes can do with the football. He's magic. You can't overstate his impact on the football field. He's a joy to watch. However much you say about this guy, you still haven't said enough. He's the best quarterback in the league right now, and I think he has a good chance of retiring as the GOAT, even ahead of Tom Brady. Of course, it doesn't exactly hurt Mahomes that he's got one of the best play callers of all time and the best receiving duo in the league to help him out. As good as Mahomes is, he wouldn't be where he is today without the genius of Andy Reid. There isn't another play caller in the league right now who does a better job of throwing a defense into utter chaos than Andy Reid. Yes, he's got superstar players, but Reid knows how to perfectly use his players' skill sets to create route concepts, pre-snap motions, blocking assignments, gimmick plays, and whatever else that just throws the defense off and makes them look stupid. The main reason the Chiefs are so fun to watch is because of this utter genius use of everything you can think of using and more on offense. The second best coaching staff in the league gives the Chiefs a monster boost in these power rankings. Another thing that boosts them so high up here is the group of receivers that they possess. More specifically, Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce. Hill is the second best wide receiver in the NFL in my opinion by a while right now. For starters, obviously he's the fastest player in the NFL. Humans can't usually run as fast as Tyreek Hill in the first place, especially when they're wearing football pads. But what amazes me about Hill as an athlete even more than his speed is how he can run that fast, then decide to stop on a dime and accelerate the other way just as fast as he stopped. His acceleration and deceleration is truly a thing to behold. I could watch Tyreek Hill run for hours and never get bored. That speed alone makes most defenses have to double him, but what makes him truly special is his route running and ball skills. There are plenty of receivers in the NFL with speed. I can name John Ross, Henry Ruggs, Jalen Reagor, John Brown, and McCole Hardman just off the top of my head. There are about 30 more guys just like them, but none of them can shake and bake in their routes or go up and high-point a pass like Tyreek Hill. Outside of maybe Davante Adams, nobody in the NFL is a better separator than Tyreek, especially down the field. And there is no receiver that even comes close to his ability to run after the catch. Tyreek Hill is the second best receiver in the game right now, and he's a lot closer to Davante Adams at 1 than he is to DeAndre Hopkins at 3. Tyreek on his own is just such a handful to cover, so imagine having to cover him and the best tight end in the league by a lot. That's what defenses have to do when facing Hill and Travis Kelce. Kelce is such an elite weapon, and I think people sometimes take for granted how insanely good he is. There isn't a tight end right now that compares to his route running ability, simply put. At 6'5", 260, it's unfair how light he's able to move on his feet. Due to his shiftiness, linebackers don't have a prayer of covering him in space, and he'll body any corner or safety he goes up against. Kelce also has a really good feel for how to sit down in zones and get open that way, plus he's elite after the catch, even on the level of George Kittle in that respect. He's the ultimate mismatch. There just isn't a way to cover both Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill, especially when Andy Reid is diagramming their routes and Patrick Mahomes is throwing them the ball. That's why the Chiefs are so damn good. There isn't really much to talk about with the other receivers, other than the speed of McCole Hardman and Byron Pringle being a good gadget for Reid to use, even if Tyreek Hill is a better gadget player than anyone in the league anyway. Keep an eye on Cornell Powell out of Clemson as the underneath guy in this deep shot offense. The offensive line that faced so many issues last year while banged up in the Super Bowl is completely retooled with 5 new starters, which should lead to better results. The mammoth Orlando Brown Jr. was acquired from Baltimore for a high cost of a first-round pick plus 3 later-round picks in the coming years. Brown was great last year, and Kansas City hopes he continues that greatness protecting Mahomes' blindside in 2021. Joe Thuney was one of the best free agency signings of the offseason and will be a surefire strength at left guard. Lawrence Duvernay-Tardif was arguably my MVP of the NFL last year because the guy opted out of a big season for him to save lives working as a doctor. Anyone willing to do that is a guy I really want to root for. KC also drafted Creed Humphrey out of Oklahoma to start at center, and one of the steals in the draft in Trey Smith out of Tennessee in the 6th. Smith could have gone first round if it weren't for injury concerns, and I wouldn't be surprised if he's starting by the end of the year. Kansas City should have the number 1 offense in football by a wide margin. The season, though, will rest on the shoulders of the Kansas City defense, which is actually an above-average unit, but it's about if they can elevate and become a top 10 defense this year. The back 7 is probably the biggest question mark on the team. Defensive coordinator Steve Spagnuolo likes to be aggressive with his blitzing, so it will be absolutely necessary that L'Jarius Sneed and Charvarius Ward consistently can hold up on the outside. Pardon me if it's disrespectful, but I have my questions about that. Tyrann Mathieu will no doubt help up clean the mistakes of those guys, though. The Honey Badger is a playmaker in every sense of the word, constantly looking to get his hands on either the ball carrier or the ball in some way or another. And you can't blame him, because the ability to always do that is what puts him in the argument for the number 1 safety in the NFL. Mathieu is a versatile superstar, and I really like Juan Thornhill at free safety also. Even if the corners aren't great, the safeties will pick up the slack in the secondary. Linebackers somewhat meh, but I will say the athleticism of Willie Gay is really something to keep an eye out for from the second-year player from Mississippi State. Nick Bolton is an instinctive run defender who can really lower the lumber. I felt he was an early second-round type guy, and the Chiefs stole him in the late second this year. The front 7 should be the strength of the defense, especially on the interior. Chris Jones is the second-best defensive tackle in the NFL behind Aaron Donald, and it isn't even close. Nobody other than Donald on the interior is able to get the kind of pressure Jones can while being doubled or even triple-teamed. He's an athletic freak, and you can absolutely not leave him one-on-one because he'll wreck your game plan 10 times out of 10. The acquisition of Jarran Reed from Seattle is a good one because they'll team with Frank Clark to get a good complementary pass rush off of Chris Jones' insane impact. Like I put on the screen, the Chiefs are hoping to run it back in 2021. What they've done in previous years has worked like a charm, so why stop now? The Chiefs are stacked to the brim with superstars and difference makers, and there's absolutely no reason that they shouldn't win the Super Bowl should everyone stay healthy. And finally, that's going to do it for my 2021 AFC Power Rankings. I'd like to give a huge thank you to everyone who stuck with me throughout the entire video. If you liked the video, once again, please like, subscribe, comment, and share. And especially be on the lookout for my next video, the NFC Power Rankings. Seeing as I'm a fan of an NFC team, that's the video I'm looking the most forward to. That said, once again, thanks to everybody for watching the video, and have a great rest of your day.